This is the Toyota Mirai, a hydrogen car that was supposed to be the future of the automobile. But that didn't really happen. With hydrogen fuel becoming more expensive and stations becoming more sparse, customers are furious. They've even threatened to sue Toyota, and hydrogen fuel car sales are down nearly 70% from last year. How has it come to this? Well, today we're going to find out how this car works, what it's like to live with one, and decide if this is the car of the future or if it should be left in the past. Alright, so first let's talk about what this car even is. While hydrogen-powered engines have been in the works since the 1800s, it wasn't until 2014 that Toyota first unveiled the Mirai to the world. Mirai literally means future in Japanese, and it's easy to see why they called it that. It's the first ever mass-produced hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. This technology creates zero toxic emissions, just pure, clean water. If you've never heard of this car before, you're not alone. In the US, you can only buy the Mirai in California, and in 2023, less than 3,000 were sold. One reason for that is the unique fueling technology, which we'll get to in a bit. But first, let's talk aesthetics. So this is the Toyota Mirai. Out in the daylight, it reminds a lot of a Toyota Camry, very Camry-esque. Let's get into the aesthetics of this thing. This second-gen Mirai looks like a deep-water fish. The high price of this car might have something to do with how many sensors are on this thing. If you get to drive it for a couple of days, it will constantly tell you what's going on the road. Yes, you will feel very safe in it. There are cameras in the fenders that warn you of cross-traffic when you're pulling out of parking lots or onto streets. It's pretty neat. This thing is jam-packed with technology, and it also has a really cool heads-up display. They have even introduced a new JBL speaker in the new Tacomas. From the side, it's a pretty good large sedan. The wheels look very aerodynamic. The spokes are quite large. Yeah, it looks like a very multi-spoke design. Do you want to see what's under the hood of this thing? Aren't you super curious? It's got a hood release just like every other Toyota. Whoa, you didn't expect anything, right? But there actually is a fuel cell in the fuel cell vehicle. The amount of orange wires in here is frankly alarming. You're not going to be working on this thing. People say the same thing about EVs. How are you going to work on them yourself? It's a valid concern. When you add extremely high-tech components like an actual fuel cell to the equation, well, better not work on that. Let's take a look at the Toyota Mirai interior. On the inside, it's not too crazy. It has Apple CarPlay and everything. Pretty standard Toyota fare. It's very comfortable and not too in your face. Yeah, you will like it too. There's not a ton of buttons in here. Climate control, buttons for volume control, which is kind of weird, and a Prius-style shifter. If you've driven a Prius before, you know how the shifter works. It's not quite Lexus levels, but it's pretty nice overall. What do we think? Exterior, keep it or leave it in the past? Leave it in the past. You will surely agree on this. It needs a little restyling. Interior, though, is pretty nice. So how the heck does this thing move around using hydrogen anyway? Well, here's the answer. Well, to kick things off, you'll need hydrogen, and you're in luck because it just so happens to be the most abundant element in the universe. Also, it's highly flammable. But the Mirai doesn't ignite its fuel with a spark plug like an internal combustion engine would. It kind of does something a lot cooler. It turns it into water. The second-generation Mirai stores up to 5.6 kg, that's 12.35 lbs, of hydrogen between 3 carbon fiber fuel tanks at a super high pressure of 10,000 psi. When you press the accelerator, hydrogen from the fuel tanks and oxygen from the intake are sent on a collision course straight to the fuel cell. And it's there where the magic happens. It doesn't just have one fuel cell, but 320 separate Mirai fuel cell layers give us enough power to make 182 electric ponies. The Mirai fuel cell stack operates at over 60% efficiency, compared to 30 to 40% of a modern ICE. Is this the future? Well, it could be. But currently there's way more investment in EV technology, which can operate up to 90% efficiency. On the street, this is a great car. The car itself does feel kind of big, but the inside feels very small. This is a great car in traffic. Even though it's pretty long, it doesn't feel big. Probably because you are low to the ground and you've got great visibility out the front. So this is a 2023 limited trim Mirai. It's got a modest 182 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque. Not bad. It can go from 0 to 60 in 9.2 seconds. Now that we know how this thing works, let's get into the biggest difference between this and any other car on the road, which is refueling. First, How far can you get on a tank of hydrogen? Toyota says pretty freaking far, but customers say otherwise. Toyota claims that the Mirai gets between 357 and 402 miles of range. It's much higher than your average EV, which only gets about 250 miles on one charge. Mirai sounds like a pretty sweet deal if that figure is true. The Toyota Mirai fill-up process involves connecting a nozzle to the vehicle and pressurizing the tank with hydrogen gas. The Mirai refueling time can vary depending on factors like tank capacity and hydrogen pressure. There are currently 48 fueling stations in the state of California, mostly clustered in the San Francisco and LA areas. Now, that might not sound too bad, but to put that into perspective, there are over 10,000 regular gas stations in the state. And what's worse is that you could drive a long way to get to a hydrogen refueling station that an app designed to show the nearest fuel station says is working, wasting a good amount of your precious fuel in the process. And then it could be closed anyway, or there might be a massive line, or the guy who got there just before you had the pump freeze to his car. Yes, that is a thing that can happen. Now, refueling seems like a nightmare and is one of the biggest problems that the Mirai is currently facing. However, customers are not happy with this car. Besides difficulties with refueling, consumers are finding that the Mirai doesn't get even close to as good of a range as Toyota advertised. Instead of 400 miles on a tank of hydrogen, many people are claiming to only be getting around 280. This has led many to ask Toyota to buy back their vehicles. Another problem people have is the price. The Mirai is not a cheap vehicle. The base Toyota Mirai price is over $51,000, and the higher trim limited edition costs an eye-watering $67,000. For $67 grand, you could get a nice M340i. There are a lot of options out there for the $67,000 mark. Hydrogen gas is also very pricey. A full tank of this stuff could cost you around 200 buckaroos. And as we've discussed, the tank will probably not get you as far as a cheaper tank of gasoline. And it's substantially more expensive to run a Mirai than just a pure EV. Not great. But did you know green hydrogen can be produced through electrolysis, which splits water molecules using electricity? At the end of the day, the people buying these hydrogen vehicles aren't necessarily trying to find the cheapest car possible. They're trying to be on the cutting edge, to be among the first to adopt what could very well be the next big thing in the automotive industry. Perhaps one day, green hydrogen will be easier and cheaper to produce. Hydrogen fuel stations will be more abundant, and all this discussion will be put to bed. The development of hydrogen fuel cell technology represents a promising pathway for the future of transportation. But until then, the Mirai will continue to be the subject of debate for likely years to come. All right, deal. Here's my question. Is this the future of cars, or should it be left in the past?